My name is Darren, and at 32 years old, I built a tech company from nothing but an idea and pure determination. Growing up in a traditional family where steady paychecks and corporate ladders defined success, my path was always viewed with skepticism. Our annual Easter dinner is sacred in my family, a time when achievements are celebrated and shortcomings silently judged. This year, my older brother Marcus decided to publicly mock my career choices. What he never expected was that Grandma Eleanor had been quietly following business news and knew exactly what happened to his company. Before I dive into this story about family rivalry, validation, and unexpected triumph, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe to join our community of real storytellers who understand that family dynamics are complicated, but healing is possible. I grew up in Westbrook, a middle-class suburban neighborhood in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Our house was modest but comfortable, with 4 bedrooms and a backyard where Dad would grill every Sunday during the summer months. My father, Robert, spent 40 years as an engineer at an automotive parts manufacturer before retiring last year. My mother, Barbara, still teaches high school chemistry and has shaped the minds of thousands of students over her 30-year career. They are practical, hard-working people who value stability and traditional markers of success. Our extended family is close-knit, gathering for every major holiday and milestone. At the center of it all is my grandmother, Eleanor. At 78, she still possesses the sharpest mind in the family. After raising 5 children while working as a librarian, she developed an uncanny ability to observe everything while appearing to notice nothing. What most of the family does not realize is that Grandma Eleanor has always had a passion for business and technology, quietly reading the Wall Street Journal and various tech publications since the 80s. Then, there is my brother Marcus. 4 years older than me at 38, Marcus has always been the golden child of our family. He followed what my parents considered the ideal path to success. He attended the University of Michigan on a partial scholarship, graduated with honors in computer science, and immediately secured a position at Techware Solutions, a large established tech corporation. Year after year, he climbed the corporate ladder, eventually becoming a senior development manager with a corner office, company car, and all the traditional trappings of success. I took a different route. From an early age, I was fascinated by building things rather than following instructions. While Marcus excelled in structured environments, I thrived in chaos and creation. After 2 years at Michigan State, I dropped out to pursue my first startup idea, much to my parents' dismay. "You are throwing your future away," my father told me. Marcus would never make such an impulsive decision, and so began the years of comparison. At every family gathering, Marcus would share his latest promotion or bonus, while my parents beamed with pride. Meanwhile, my entrepreneurial journey was a roller coaster of small successes and crushing failures. My first startup, a local social networking app, collapsed after 6 months. My second venture, a marketplace for independent game developers, lasted almost 2 years before running out of funding. Throughout these struggles, Marcus never missed an opportunity to highlight the contrast between our paths. "How is your little project going?" he would ask at Thanksgiving dinner, knowing full well my company had just folded. "Still working out of that coffee shop?" he would inquire at Christmas, while describing his new executive office. The subtle put-downs became a constant feature of our relationship. "Not everyone is cut out for the corporate world," he would tell relatives, as if my choice was driven by inability rather than passion. "Darren likes to do his own thing," he would explain, with the unspoken implication that my thing was less valuable than his. Our parents, while loving, reinforced this dynamic. They would listen politely to my business ideas, but save their genuine enthusiasm for Marcus updates. When I talked about potential growth or innovation, my father would inevitably ask about health insurance and retirement plans. Meanwhile, Marcus received congratulatory calls when he got a 2% raise. Despite this constant undercurrent of dismissal, I persisted. 3 years ago, I founded my current company, NextSync Solutions, developing integration software that helps different business systems communicate seamlessly. We started small, just me and 2 developers working out of my apartment. The first year was brutal, with 18-hour days and ramen noodle dinners. The second year, we secured our first major client, then 3 more. By the beginning of our third year, we had 26 employees and were expanding rapidly. What my family did not understand, perhaps could not understand, was that while Marcus was managing projects within the constraints of corporate bureaucracy, I was building something from nothing. My company was now attracting attention from major players in the tech industry, including Techware Solutions, where Marcus worked. The irony was not lost on me, but I kept this information to myself, partly because large corporate acquisitions are complex and unpredictable, and partly because I had grown tired of trying to prove my worth to a family that seemed determined to measure success with an outdated yardstick. The annual Easter dinner at my parents' house is an institution in our family. My mother spends days preparing traditional dishes. The table is set with the good china that belonged to my great-grandmother, and everyone is expected to attend, regardless of distance or circumstances. This year, as I drove the 3 hours from Chicago to Grand Rapids, I felt the familiar mixture of anticipation and anxiety. I loved my family deeply, but dreaded the inevitable comparisons and subtle dismissals of my life choices. What I did not know, as I pulled into my parents' driveway, was that this Easter would be different from all the others. This Easter would change everything. The familiar scent of honeysuckle greeted me as I walked up the brick pathway to my childhood home. Mom had outdone herself with decorations this year. Pastel-colored eggs hung from the branches of the maple tree in the front yard. A wreath of spring flowers adorned the door, and bunny-shaped lawn ornaments peeked out from behind budding shrubs. These Easter touches were new, but the house itself remained unchanged. A 2-story colonial painted soft yellow with white trim, exactly as it had been since I was 10 years old. I heard laughter from inside before I even rang the doorbell. The whole family was already there, judging by the cars lining the street. Aunt Patricia and Uncle James, my cousins Samantha and Benjamin with their spouses, and of course, a sleek black Mercedes that could only belong to Marcus. I took a deep breath, plastered on my most confident smile, and pressed the doorbell. Mom answered with a flour-dusted apron and a warm hug. "Darren, I was beginning to think you got lost on the way from Chicago," she said, ushering me inside. "Traffic on I-94 was brutal," I replied, handing her the bottle of wine I had brought. But I would not miss Easter dinner for anything. The house was bustling with activity. Uncle James and my father were discussing lawn care in the living room. My cousins were helping set up additional chairs in the dining room, and various other relatives were scattered throughout the first floor, catching up and snacking on my mother's famous deviled eggs. Everyone greeted me warmly, though most conversations quickly turned to polite but vague questions about my work. "So, the tech business is going well?" asked Uncle James, clearly having no idea what my company actually did. "That internet stuff is the future, for sure," added my father, patting me on the shoulder before steering the conversation back to the merits of different fertilizer brands. I made my way through the house, accepting hugs and answering the same general questions about my health, my non-existent dating life, and my computer business. It was not until I reached the kitchen that I saw Marcus. He was leaning against the counter, looking polished in designer jeans and a cashmere sweater, regaling my mother and Aunt Patricia with a story about his recent business trip to Seattle. "Darren," he exclaimed upon seeing me, his voice just a touch too enthusiastic. "The entrepreneur has arrived." He stepped forward to give me a brief hug, clapping me on the back with unnecessary force. "How is the startup life treating you?" "It is not a startup anymore," I corrected him, trying to keep my voice light. "We have been established for 3 years now." 3 years? That is practically ancient in tech years, Marcus laughed. "We just celebrated Techware's 25th anniversary. The CEO flew us all to Las Vegas for the weekend. Corporate perks, you know." Before I could respond, he turned to our mother. "I just got the promotion I was telling you about. Senior Director of Platform Development. They are even giving me a team of 30 developers to manage." Mom beamed with pride. "That is wonderful, Marcus. Your father will be so pleased." I noticed Marcus avoided meeting my eyes as he continued. The compensation package is impressive too. Stock options, increased retirement matching, the works. I felt the familiar sting of being overshadowed but simply nodded and congratulated him. As I helped myself to a glass of water, I noticed something strange. There was a tension in Marcus's shoulders that did not match his boastful words, and when Mom asked about specific details of his new position, he quickly changed the subject. Aunt Patricia soon pulled my mother away to consult on some cooking question, leaving Marcus and me alone in the kitchen. An awkward silence fell between us. "So how are things really going?" I asked, genuinely curious about the disconnect I was sensing. "Couldn't be better," he replied too quickly, checking his phone as if expecting an important message. "The corporate world keeps moving forward. Stability, growth, you know the drill." I was about to press further when we were interrupted by a familiar voice. "There is my entrepreneurial grandson." Grandma Eleanor entered the kitchen, elegant as always in a lavender dress, with her silver hair perfectly styled. She walked directly to me, ignoring Marcus momentarily, and took both my hands in hers. "Darren, I want to hear all about your software company, the one that helps different computer systems talk to each other." Her eyes twinkled as she added, "I have been reading quite a bit about integration software lately. Fascinating field." Marcus scoffed lightly. "Grandma, I did not know you had become a tech expert." "There is a lot you do not know about me, dear," she replied, patting his cheek before turning back to me. "Now, Darren, tell me about your latest developments while I rest these old feet." We moved to the relative quiet of the family room, where Grandma Eleanor asked surprisingly specific questions about my business model, recent contracts, and growth strategy. Unlike the rest of the family, she actually seemed to understand what NextSync Solutions did and why it mattered. "It sounds like you are making quite an impact in the industry," she noted. "Are you considering any expansion opportunities? Perhaps acquisitions?" I nearly choked on my water. "We are exploring several options," I said carefully, wondering how she could possibly know about our recent activities. She simply nodded, a knowing look in her eyes. "Always good to keep your options open. Now, help an old woman to the dining room. I believe your mother is about to announce dinner." As we walked, I spotted Marcus watching us with an unreadable expression. For the first time in our adult lives, I felt like the scales had shifted slightly between us, and he knew it too. The dining room was a showcase of my mother's talents. The table, extended to its full length with all 3 leaves inserted, was covered with a cream-colored lace tablecloth. The good china gleamed under the light of the chandelier, and crystal glasses caught and reflected the afternoon sun streaming through the bay windows. Name cards written in my mother's perfect calligraphy marked each person's place, with traditional family seating arrangements maintained year after year. As always, Marcus and I were seated across from each other, with our parents at either end of the table. Grandma Eleanor, usually seated next to my mother, had somehow been relocated to sit directly to my right. As everyone found their places, I caught her slight smile and wondered if this repositioning had been her idea. The table began to fill with platters of food. A glazed ham took center stage, surrounded by scalloped potatoes, green bean casserole, homemade rolls, and various spring vegetables. The familiar scene filled me with conflicting emotions. There was the warmth of tradition and family, but also the anxiety of knowing that dinner conversation would inevitably turn to careers and achievements, where Marcus traditionally dominated. As we took our seats, I felt a curious mix of the desire for family validation I had carried for years and a new, growing sense of pride in my own path. Perhaps this year would be different. Perhaps. "Everyone join hands for grace," my father announced once we were all seated. This was another unbreakable tradition in our household, regardless of how religious any of us actually were throughout the year. We all obediently linked hands as Dad delivered his standard Easter blessing, thanking God for family, food, and good fortune. When he finished, the feast began in earnest. Platters were passed, plates were filled, and the initial conversation stayed safely in neutral territory. Uncle James discussed his new golf clubs, Aunt Patricia shared updates about her garden club, and my cousin Samantha announced that her 7-year-old son had been selected for the gifted program at school, prompting appropriate congratulations from around the table. I was halfway through my first helping of ham and scalloped potatoes when my father cleared his throat in that particular way that signaled he was about to steer the conversation. "So, how is everyone doing career-wise?" he asked, though his eyes immediately went to Marcus. "Any exciting developments to share?" And, just like that, the door was opened. Marcus straightened in his chair, setting down his fork with practiced precision. "Actually, yes," he began, his voice taking on the polished tone he reserved for these moments. "As I was telling Mom earlier, I received that promotion to Senior Director of Platform Development at Techware. It is a significant step up, with substantially more responsibility and compensation." "That is wonderful news," my father beamed, raising his glass in a toast to Marcus and his continued success. Everyone dutifully raised their glasses, while Marcus nodded graciously, as if accepting his due. "The position puts me on track for executive leadership," he added. "Only 3 steps away from the C-suite now." "How impressive," Aunt Patricia chimed in. "Your parents must be so proud to have raised such a successful son." I noticed the subtle way she glanced in my direction after this comment, the unspoken comparison hanging in the air. I focused on cutting my ham into perfectly even pieces, determined not to let it bother me. "What exactly will you be doing in this new role?" Uncle James asked Marcus. Marcus launched into a detailed explanation of his responsibilities, using just enough technical jargon to sound impressive, while remaining vague enough that no one could quite grasp what he actually did. He mentioned strategic initiatives and cross-functional leadership and enterprise architecture governance, while everyone nodded as if they understood completely. "The corporate structure provides such stability," my mother noted approvingly. "It is good to know your future is secure." "Absolutely," Marcus agreed. "That is the beauty of established companies like Techware. We are too big to fail, too essential to the industry ecosystem." Then, inevitably, the attention shifted to me. "And how about you, Darren?" my father asked, his tone noticeably different. "Is your computer business still afloat?" Before I could answer, Marcus chuckled. "Dad, NextSync is not just a computer business. It is what do you call it again, Darren? A systems integration platform?" "That is right," I said, seizing the opportunity. "Actually, we have had some major developments recently. We have expanded to 26 employees, and our client list has grown to include several Fortune 500 companies. We are projecting to double our revenue this year." I could see genuine interest flickering in my father's eyes, but Marcus quickly jumped in. "26 employees? That is about the size of my new team's administrative support staff," he said with a laugh that others around the table echoed. "But that is the charm of startups, isn't it? Everything feels so significant on a small scale." "It is not a startup," I repeated, feeling heat rise in my face. "We are an established company with a solid product and growing market share." Of course, Marcus said dismissively. "I am sure it is very exciting. Reminds me of my early days at Techware, before I moved into real leadership." My cousin Benjamin, always the peacemaker, tried to intervene. "I think what Darren is doing sounds impressive. Building something from scratch takes a lot of courage." "Courage, certainly," Marcus agreed, his tone patronizing. "Though in the corporate world, we tend to value stability and strategic thinking over, what shall we call it? Entrepreneurial gambling?" I took a long sip of water, trying to cool the anger building inside me. "Our approach is actually very strategic. We identified a gap in the market and developed a solution that addresses real business needs." "That is nice," Marcus said, cutting into his ham. "It is good to have hobbies that might someday turn into careers." Several family members shifted uncomfortably in their seats, the tension becoming palpable. My mother, sensing danger, attempted to change the subject to my cousin Samantha's recent kitchen renovation, but Marcus was not finished. "The tech industry can be brutal for small players," he continued, addressing the table at large. 90% of startups fail, you know. That is why the serious professionals tend to gravitate toward established companies with proven business models. "NextSync is profitable," I countered. "We have been for over a year now." Marcus raised an eyebrow. Profitable enough to provide healthcare benefits, retirement plans, job security for those 26 people who depend on you? He turned to our parents. Did you know that most startup employees end up having to change jobs every 18 months as these small companies fold or get acqui-hired just to salvage whatever value they have created? Our employees have full benefits, I said through gritted teeth. And no one has left the company since we started. For now, Marcus shrugged. But the reality is that building a sustainable tech business requires infrastructure and resources that only established corporations can provide. Playing around with code in a rented office space is not the same as operating at enterprise scale. I opened my mouth to respond, but was cut off by my father. Marcus has a point, Darren. There is something to be said for traditional career paths. The stability is an illusion, I finally snapped. Large companies lay people off all the time. No job is truly secure. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. I immediately regretted my outburst, not because it was wrong, but because I had broken the unspoken rule of our family gatherings: maintain the illusion of harmony at all costs. Marcus seized the moment. Well, that might be true in some industries, but not at companies like Techware. We just announced record profits last quarter. If anything, we are expanding, not contracting. The conversation might have moved on then, had Marcus been content with his small victory. But something, perhaps the brief moment when I had challenged the family narrative, seemed to bother him deeply. As the main course was cleared and dessert was brought out, he became increasingly pointed in his commentary. You know, he said, accepting a slice of my mother's homemade lemon meringue pie, there is a reason why most successful tech executives come up through established channels. The discipline, the professional standards, the mentorship. Not everyone can handle a real career in tech. Some people need the freedom to make mistakes without consequences, to call themselves CEO of a company that would be a rounding error on a real corporate balance sheet. The table fell silent. The mockery was no longer subtle, no longer disguised as brotherly teasing or helpful advice. It was a direct attack, delivered with a smile, but designed to put me firmly in my place in front of our entire family. I felt the eyes of everyone at the table moving between Marcus and me, waiting for my response. A lifetime of Easter dinners had taught me to laugh it off, to accept my designated role as the less successful brother. But something had changed in me. I opened my mouth, though I wasn't quite sure what would come out. Before I could speak, an unexpected voice broke the silence. Darren, Grandma Eleanor said, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife through butter. She set down her fork deliberately and turned to face me, though her words were clearly meant for the entire table. Is that why your company just bought out his division and laid him off? The silence that followed was unlike anything I had ever experienced at our family dinner table. It was absolute, profound, as if everyone had simultaneously forgotten how to breathe. I stared at my grandmother, certain I had misheard her, but the steady look in her eyes told me she had chosen her words with perfect precision. My gaze shifted to Marcus. The transformation in his face was instantaneous and complete. The smug confidence drained away, replaced by a sickly pallor that made the contrast with his earlier demeanor all the more shocking. His mouth opened and closed without producing sound, like a fish suddenly finding itself on dry land. What did you say, Mom? My father finally managed, looking between my grandmother and Marcus with utter confusion. Grandma Eleanor took a small sip of her water before responding, the picture of composure. I simply asked if Darren's company, NextSync Solutions, is the same one that recently acquired the Integration Systems division of Techware Solutions, resulting in the elimination of several management positions, including the one previously held by Marcus. My mother gasped. Marcus? Is this true? The attention of the entire table swiveled to my brother, who appeared to be shrinking in his chair. For a moment, I thought he might deny it, but the evidence was written all over his face. It is complicated, he finally stammered. There was a strategic restructuring. From what I read in the Business Technology Review, Grandma Eleanor continued calmly, NextSync Solutions completed the acquisition 3 weeks ago. Quite impressive for such a young company to absorb a division of an established corporation like Techware. The article specifically mentioned how NextSync's innovative approach made the larger company's traditional systems obsolete. I sat frozen, my mind racing to process this revelation. My company had indeed acquired Techware's Integration Systems division, a move that had been in negotiations for months. As the CEO, I knew that the acquisition included eliminating redundant management positions, but I had been deliberately kept away from the personnel details to avoid conflicts of interest. I had no idea Marcus had been among those affected. "You knew about this?" I finally asked my grandmother, finding my voice. She smiled slightly. "I subscribe to several business and technology publications. I like to stay informed about industries that interest me, particularly when my grandsons are involved." Uncle James let out a low whistle. "So let me get this straight. Marcus has been laid off by Darren's company? The startup?" "It is not a startup," both Grandma Eleanor and I said simultaneously. Marcus finally seemed to recover his ability to speak coherently. "It was not a layoff in the traditional sense," he insisted, though his voice lacked conviction. "It was a mutual decision as part of the acquisition process. I am exploring new opportunities within the company's other divisions." "But you do not currently have a position at Techware," Grandma pressed, her tone gentle but unyielding. "Not at this exact moment." "No," Marcus admitted, staring down at his half-eaten pie. "And the promotion you were just telling us about?" my father asked, his brow furrowed in confusion. A flush of color returned to Marcus's face, this time from embarrassment rather than confidence. "That was before the acquisition was finalized. Plans changed. Yet you let us believe otherwise," my mother said quietly, the hurt evident in her voice. "You told us about this promotion just today." The realization slowly dawned on everyone at the table. Marcus had come to Easter dinner and boasted about a promotion that no longer existed, while mocking my career choices, apparently unaware that my company was now effectively his former employer. "I did not want to disappoint everyone," Marcus mumbled. "I was going to find a new position before anyone needed to know." Aunt Patricia, always quick to smooth over family conflicts, tried to salvage the situation. "Well, these things happen in business. I am sure Marcus will land on his feet in no time." "Of course he will," I heard myself saying, though I hardly recognized my own voice. The vindication I might have expected to feel was strangely absent, replaced instead by an uncomfortable mixture of shock and empathy. Despite years of dismissal and mockery, seeing my brother humiliated brought me no pleasure. "Maybe you could hire him," my cousin Benjamin suggested, attempting a joke that fell painfully flat. My eyes met Marcus's across the table. For the first time in our adult lives, I saw something I had never expected to see there: vulnerability. The carefully constructed facade of the successful corporate executive had crumbled completely, revealing the insecure person beneath. "I think I will get some air," Marcus said abruptly, tossing his napkin beside his plate and standing up. He left the dining room without another word, the back door closing firmly behind him. The table erupted into hushed conversations. My parents looked shell-shocked, trying to reconcile the image of their golden child with this new reality. Grandma Eleanor, however, seemed perfectly content, calmly finishing her pie as if she had not just detonated a bomb in the middle of our family dinner. "How long have you known about this, Darren?" my father asked, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. "I knew about the acquisition," I admitted, "but I had no idea Marcus was affected. I deliberately stayed away from the personnel decisions to avoid any conflicts of interest." "So your little company bought out part of Techware," Uncle James said, clearly trying to process this information. "That must have been a significant deal." "It was," I confirmed. "NextSync has grown considerably over the past year. Our integration solutions proved more effective and cost-efficient than traditional approaches, including the ones developed by Techware's division." As the implications of this sank in around the table, I could see a shift occurring in real time. The family members who had nodded politely but dismissively when I discussed my business were now looking at me with new eyes, reassessing everything they thought they knew about my career choices. "I should probably go talk to him," I said, standing up from the table. No one objected. As I headed toward the back door, Grandma Eleanor caught my hand. Sometimes truth is the kindest gift we can give, even when it does not feel that way in the moment, she said quietly. I nodded, though I wasn't entirely convinced. As I stepped outside to find my brother, I wondered if this Easter dinner would mark the end of our relationship entirely, or possibly the beginning of something new and more authentic. I found Marcus sitting on the old wooden swing at the far end of the backyard, staring blankly at the rose bushes our mother had been cultivating for 20 years. They were just beginning to bud, tiny specks of green, promising beauty that had yet to materialize. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. He didn't look up as I approached, though the creaking of the wooden boards beneath my feet certainly announced my presence. I hesitated, suddenly unsure what to say. All the practiced responses I had developed over years of dealing with his condescension seemed woefully inadequate for this moment. You could have told me, I finally said, sitting down on the matching swing beside him, about the acquisition affecting your position. Marcus continued staring straight ahead. Would you have enjoyed that? Me coming to you hat in hand, admitting that your little startup had essentially ended my career? It hasn't ended your career, I said automatically. And I wouldn't have enjoyed it. Sure, he scoffed, though without much energy. The fight seemed to have drained out of him, leaving behind a hollow shell of the confident executive who had arrived for dinner hours earlier. We sat in silence for several minutes, the only sound the distant chirping of birds and the occasional creak of the swing chains. It was strange to be sitting here again, in the same spot where we had spent countless hours as children, before competition and comparison had soured our relationship. How did I not know? I finally asked. About you specifically being laid off? I was involved in every other aspect of the acquisition. Marcus let out a bitter laugh. Your head of operations, Thomas Carter? We went to college together. When he realized my name was on the redundancy list, he made sure the HR team kept it separate from the documents you would see. Professional courtesy, I suppose. Or pity. I made a mental note to have a serious conversation with Thomas when I returned to Chicago. His intentions might have been good, but keeping me in the dark had led to this disastrous situation. I want you to know that I would have handled things differently if I had known, I said. Would you have saved my job? Given me special treatment because we are brothers? Marcus asked, finally turning to look at me. That would have undermined everything you have built. Your team would have lost respect for you. He was right, and we both knew it. Business decisions couldn't be made on the basis of family connections, not if I wanted to maintain the integrity of the company I had worked so hard to build. Why did you lie to everyone? I asked instead of answering his question. About the promotion? About still having a job? Marcus ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, messing it up for the first time I could remember. Do you have any idea what it is like to build your entire identity around corporate success? To have mom and dad introduce you as our son, the executive for 15 years? To be the golden child everyone looks up to? He shook his head. I couldn't bear to disappoint them. To admit that the path they had been so proud of me for following had led to this. So instead you came to Easter dinner and mocked my career choices? The same choices that led to the company that acquired your division? I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. I know it was wrong, he admitted, surprising me. I thought I had one more family dinner, where I could be the successful son before I had to admit the truth. And then you started talking about your company's growth, and I snapped. The raw honesty in his voice caught me off guard. In all our adult years, I couldn't remember a single instance where Marcus had admitted to being wrong or feeling insecure. I have been jealous of you, he continued, the words seemingly painful to extract. For years, actually. You had the courage to build something of your own, while I just followed the safe path, doing what was expected. I stared at him in disbelief. Are you serious? You have been belittling my choices for years, making me feel like a failure for not following the traditional corporate track. Because I needed to believe I had made the right choice, he said simply. Every time you talked about the freedom of running your own company, of building something from nothing, it made me question my own decisions. It was easier to convince myself that you were the one who had chosen poorly. The revelation stunned me into silence. All these years, I had assumed Marcus looked down on me from his position of success and family approval. The idea that he might have envied my freedom had never crossed my mind. And now I have nothing, he added quietly. No job, no prospects, and a family in there who just discovered I have been lying to them. That is not true, I said firmly. You have experience, skills, industry knowledge, and regardless of what happened in there, you still have family who cares about you. He looked skeptical. Mom and Dad are probably rethinking their entire value system right now. Maybe that is not such a bad thing, I suggested. They have always loved us both, Marcus. They just got caught up in measuring success in a very narrow way. We fell silent again, both processing the seismic shift that had occurred in our relationship. Through the kitchen window, I could see our family still seated around the table, engaged in animated conversation, no doubt trying to make sense of everything they had just learned. What happens now? Marcus finally asked, his voice uncharacteristically uncertain. That depends, I said. Do you want my professional opinion as the CEO of a growing tech company, or my personal opinion as your brother? Is there a difference? Professionally, I would say that someone with your experience and industry knowledge would be a valuable asset to many companies, including possibly NextSync, though that would require careful consideration of potential conflicts and team dynamics. Marcus raised an eyebrow. And personally? Personally, I said, choosing my words carefully, I think this might be an opportunity for both of us to move past the competition that has defined our relationship for too long. Whatever you decide to do next career-wise, maybe we could try being brothers who support each other instead of constantly trying to prove who made the better choices. For the first time that day, possibly for the first time in years, Marcus smiled at me without a trace of condescension or competition. It was small and tentative, but genuine. I would like that, he said quietly, though I am not sure I know how to do that anymore. We can figure it out together, I offered, starting with going back inside and facing the family with honesty. Both of us. Marcus nodded slowly, then stood up from the swing. Do you think they will forgive me for lying? They are family, I said, standing to join him. They might be shocked and disappointed right now, but they will get over it. As we walked back toward the house, I noticed our parents and Grandma Eleanor watching us through the window. Their expressions were unreadable from this distance, but the fact that they were watching at all suggested they cared about what happened between us. For what it is worth, Marcus said, as we reached the back door, what you have built with NextSync is impressive, genuinely impressive. I should have acknowledged that long ago. The simple validation, something I had sought from him for years, washed over me with unexpected power. Thank you, I said, meaning it. That means a lot coming from you. We stepped back into the house together, ready to face our family and whatever came next. For the first time in our adult lives, we entered not as rivals, but as brothers. The remainder of Easter Sunday passed in a blur of awkward conversations and readjusting expectations. My parents, to their credit, recovered from their shock relatively quickly and focused on supporting Marcus rather than dwelling on his deception. The extended family, sensing the profound shift in dynamics, made their excuses and departed earlier than usual, leaving just my parents, Grandma Eleanor, Marcus, and me to navigate the aftermath. That evening, as most of the family drove back to their respective homes, I made the decision to stay overnight at my parents' house, something I rarely did during my visits. Marcus had already planned to stay through Monday, and I sensed that there was more healing to be done between us. My small company could survive without me for one extra day. The next morning, I came downstairs to find Grandma Eleanor already at the kitchen table, sipping tea and reading the business section of the newspaper. She looked up as I entered, a knowing smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Good morning, CEO," she said, folding the paper neatly. "I trust you slept well?" "Better than I expected, considering everything that happened yesterday," I admitted, pouring myself a cup of coffee from the pot someone had already brewed. "You know, you could have warned me about Marcus's situation before I walked into that minefield." She shrugged delicately. "Some revelations need to happen organically, in the presence of witnesses. Otherwise, they can be denied or minimized." "So you orchestrated that whole scene?" I asked, sitting across from her. "To what end?" "I orchestrated nothing," she replied calmly. "I simply spoke the truth when it was most needed. As for the end goal." She paused, taking a thoughtful sip of her tea. Let us just say I have been watching both my grandsons travel different paths for many years, neither one fully appreciating the other's journey. Sometimes a moment of radical honesty is required to break unhealthy patterns. You knew about my company all along, I realized. The acquisitions, the growth. You were never confused about what NextSync does. I subscribe to 6 different technology and business journals, she said matter-of-factly. I may be 78, but my mind is sharper than most of my bridge club friends, who still think the internet is primarily for sharing cookie recipes and pictures of grandchildren. I couldn't help but laugh. Why didn't you ever say anything during all those family dinners when everyone was dismissing my career choices? Her expression softened. Would it have meant as much, coming from me? You needed to prove yourself on your own terms, Darren, and you have. Magnificently. Just as Marcus needed to learn that corporate security is often an illusion, and that his worth is not defined by his title or salary. You are a devious woman, Grandma Eleanor, I said with newfound admiration. Strategic, she corrected, her eyes twinkling. A quality you clearly inherited from my side of the family. Our conversation was interrupted as Marcus entered the kitchen, looking rumpled and tired, but somehow more authentic than I had seen him in years. Gone was the perfectly pressed business casual attire, replaced by an old Michigan sweatshirt and jeans. Morning, he mumbled, heading straight for the coffee pot. Sleep well, dear? Grandma Eleanor asked innocently. About as well as could be expected, he replied, joining us at the table. I spent half the night updating my resume and the other half questioning every career decision I have ever made. A worthwhile exercise for anyone, Grandma noted. We were soon joined by our parents, and breakfast became a surprisingly open conversation about careers, values, and family expectations. For the first time in memory, my father admitted that he had always secretly admired entrepreneurs, but had been too risk-averse to become one himself. My mother confessed that her emphasis on traditional success metrics came from her own parents' disappointment in her choice to become a teacher rather than a doctor. I guess we projected some of our own insecurities onto both of you, she acknowledged, pushing Marcus toward the security we thought was important, while worrying about Darren's riskier path. We are proud of both of you, my father added, with a sincerity I had rarely heard from him, in different ways. As we prepared to depart later that morning, I found myself alone with Marcus in the driveway. He was loading his overnight bag into his Mercedes, which suddenly seemed less like a status symbol and more like an unnecessary expense for someone between jobs. So what is next for you? I asked. He leaned against the car, considering the question. Honestly, I am not sure. For the first time in my adult life, I don't have a 5-year plan. It is terrifying, but also strangely liberating. I know the feeling, I told him. That is pretty much how I felt when I dropped out of college to start my first company. How did you handle the uncertainty? One day at a time, I said, focusing on building something valuable rather than achieving specific status markers. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. I might need some advice on that approach, if you are willing to share. Any time, I said, and meant it. What followed over the next several weeks was a transformation in our relationship that I could never have predicted. Marcus and I began speaking regularly by phone, our conversations evolving from awkward check-ins to genuine exchanges of ideas and experiences. He asked questions about entrepreneurship and building a company culture, while I gained insights from his years of experience in corporate environments. 3 weeks after Easter, I invited Marcus to visit NextSync's offices in Chicago. He accepted immediately, and I arranged for him to meet with various team members and observe our operations. What I had not told him was that I was considering offering him a role, though I was still working through the implications of bringing my brother into the company. The Marcus who arrived at our downtown office was markedly different from the brother I had known for years. He was attentive rather than dismissive, curious rather than judgmental. As I showed him around, introducing him to the team as my brother, rather than Marcus the executive, I could see him taking genuine interest in what we had built. Your culture here is remarkable, he observed over lunch. Everyone seems engaged and passionate about their work. That is rare. We have worked hard to create an environment where innovation is valued and people feel ownership over their contributions, I explained. It shows, he said sincerely. I have worked at Techware for 15 years and never felt the kind of energy I feel here. By the end of his visit, I had made my decision. I invited Marcus to join me on the rooftop deck that served as our company's break area and informal meeting space. I have been thinking, I began, looking out at the Chicago skyline rather than directly at him. NextSync is growing rapidly since the acquisition. We need someone to head up our new enterprise integration division, someone who understands the corporate market and can speak their language while translating our innovative approach. Marcus went very still beside me. Are you offering me a job? I am suggesting a possibility, I clarified. It would need to be discussed with the leadership team, and there would be conditions. What kind of conditions? He asked cautiously. You would report to our COO, not directly to me. There would be no special treatment because you are my brother. In fact, you would probably need to work twice as hard to prove yourself to the team, and your compensation would be based on the same structure as other directors, including equity rather than just salary. That all sounds reasonable, he said slowly. But why would you want to bring me in? After everything? I turned to face him directly. Because despite our differences, you are incredibly good at what you do. You understand enterprise clients in a way most of our team does not. And I paused, finding the right words. I believe people deserve second chances to reinvent themselves. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, processing my offer. I would need to earn the team's trust, he finally said, especially since they know I came from the division that was acquired. Yes, you would, I agreed. It wouldn't be easy. Nothing worthwhile ever is, he said, echoing a phrase our father had repeated throughout our childhood. I would like to try, if your team is willing to have me. 2 days later, after thorough discussions with our leadership team, Marcus accepted the position of Director of Enterprise Integration at NextSync Solutions. He took a significant pay cut from his previous corporate salary, but gained equity in a rapidly growing company. More importantly, he gained the opportunity to rebuild his career on a new foundation, one based on contribution rather than status. The transition wasn't smooth. There were team members who were skeptical, clients who questioned the wisdom of hiring someone from the acquired company, and moments when our brotherly dynamics threatened to interfere with professional decisions. But over time, Marcus proved himself to be an invaluable addition to the team, bringing insights and connections that accelerated our growth in the enterprise market. My parents, meanwhile, underwent their own evolution. They began asking more insightful questions about both of our work, no longer automatically assuming that Marcus's path was inherently more successful or secure. They even came to visit our Chicago office, finally seeing firsthand what I had built over the years. I wish we had understood sooner, my mother told me during their visit, watching Marcus leading a client meeting through the glass walls of our conference room. What you were building, and how meaningful it could be. Better late than never, I assured her, feeling a weight lift that I hadn't realized I had been carrying for so many years. As for Grandma Eleanor, she remained as insightful and strategic as ever. She began sending both Marcus and me articles about industry trends, often with handwritten notes in the margins offering her surprisingly astute observations. When I called to thank her for a particularly helpful analysis, she simply said, I always knew both my grandsons were destined for great things, just not necessarily in the ways everyone expected. 6 months after that fateful Easter dinner, the transformation in our family dynamics was remarkable. The competition that had defined our relationship for decades had been replaced by collaboration and mutual respect. We still had our differences and disagreements, but they were no longer fueled by the toxic need to prove our worth through comparison. And it had all begun with a single moment of truth at a family dinner table, delivered by the person we had least expected to be monitoring our professional lives. Sometimes the most profound changes come from the most unexpected sources. November arrived with a crisp chill in the air, trees shedding their vibrant autumn colors as Chicago prepared for winter. As Thanksgiving approached, our family faced a break in tradition for the first time in decades. Instead of gathering at our parents' home in Michigan, Everyone would be coming to my downtown condo for the holiday meal. The change in venue symbolized the larger transformation our family had undergone since Easter. My apartment, with its open floor plan and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan, was nothing like the traditional suburban home where we had celebrated holidays throughout our childhood. Yet, as I prepared the space for our family gathering, I felt a sense of rightness about hosting this particular Thanksgiving. Marcus arrived early Thursday morning to help with preparations, bringing the pumpkin pies he had insisted on baking himself, a new hobby he had discovered in his post-corporate life. He looked relaxed in jeans and a casual sweater, the perpetual tension he had carried in his shoulders notably absent. "The place looks great," he observed, setting down the pies and looking around the decorated apartment. "Though Mom will probably rearrange everything when she arrives." "Some traditions never change," I laughed. "How are things with Jessica?" I asked, referring to the woman he had recently started dating, a graphic designer he would never have considered a suitable match during his corporate executive days. "Really good, actually," he said, a genuine smile spreading across his face. "She is sorry she could not join today, but she had already committed to her family gathering in Seattle. We are planning to spend Christmas together." "I am glad to hear it," I said sincerely. "She seems to appreciate the real you." "That is the thing," Marcus said, helping himself to coffee from the pot I had brewing. "I am not sure I knew who the real me was until recently. I spent so many years crafting this perfect corporate persona that I lost track of the actual person underneath." We worked together, preparing the apartment for our guests, setting the dining table with the mix of modern dishware I owned, and the traditional silver serving pieces our mother had insisted on bringing from Michigan. There was something fitting about the blend of old and new, tradition and innovation, just as our family was finding a new balance. My parents arrived next, followed shortly by Grandma Eleanor, who at 79 had insisted on taking the train from Michigan rather than riding with my parents. "I prefer to travel on my own schedule," she had told them, a philosophy that extended to many aspects of her independent life. As we gathered around my dining table, the scene was both familiar and entirely new. The traditional Thanksgiving foods were present, though prepared with my modern culinary sensibilities. The family dynamics were recognizable but significantly evolved. Most notably, Marcus and I sat side by side rather than across from each other, a small but meaningful change in the physical representation of our relationship. "Before we eat," my father said, preparing to say grace as he always did, "I want to acknowledge how much has changed since we were last all together at Easter. Our family has grown in ways I never expected." He looked meaningfully at Marcus and me. "I have learned that success comes in many forms, and that what matters most is not titles or traditions, but truth and mutual support." As we enjoyed our meal, the conversation flowed naturally between personal updates and work discussions. My parents asked insightful questions about NextSync's latest projects, showing genuine interest rather than polite confusion. Marcus shared his experiences heading the enterprise division, speaking with an enthusiasm I had never heard during his 15 years at TechWare. "The client we landed last week actually came through a connection from Marcus's network," I told our parents, giving credit where it was due. "His understanding of the enterprise landscape has opened doors we could not have accessed otherwise." "We make a good team," Marcus acknowledged, without a hint of the competitive edge that would have colored such a statement in the past. Darren's innovative vision, combined with my experience navigating corporate bureaucracy, plus, he added with a grin, "I am much better at PowerPoint presentations. You should see the mess he creates with slide transitions. That is because I am too busy building the actual product to worry about animation effects," I shot back good-naturedly. Grandma Eleanor watched our exchange with a satisfied smile. "Sometimes the most successful partnerships come from complementary strengths rather than similar ones," she observed. Something corporate America often fails to recognize in its preference for homogeneity. After dinner, as we enjoyed coffee and Marcus's surprisingly excellent pumpkin pie, Grandma Eleanor pulled me aside to the kitchen under the pretense of helping with dessert plates. "I am proud of you," she said simply. "Not just for your business success, but for how you have handled everything with your brother." "I should be thanking you," I told her. "If you had not exposed the truth at Easter, Who knows how many more years we would have spent locked in that destructive pattern? The truth was always there, she replied. It just needed someone willing to speak it aloud. But what you did afterward, offering Marcus a chance to rebuild, rather than taking satisfaction in his downfall, that was entirely your choice. And the right one. It has not always been easy, I admitted. There are days at the office when I want to pull the CEO card when we disagree on strategy. Of course there are, she said pragmatically. Family relationships are never perfect, in or out of business. The difference is that now you are both working towards something constructive, rather than trying to tear each other down. Later that evening, as the family gathered in the living room area, my father raised his glass in an impromptu toast. To new beginnings and old wisdom, he said, nodding toward Grandma Eleanor. And to my sons, who have taught their old man that success is not measured by the path you take, but by the integrity with which you walk it. As I looked around at my family, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for the journey we had taken together over the past 6 months. The Easter dinner that had begun with mockery and ended in shocking revelation had ultimately been the catalyst for genuine healing and growth. I have come to understand that true success is not about proving others wrong or accumulating status symbols to impress family members. It is about finding your authentic path and pursuing it with passion and integrity, even when those closest to you fail to understand or appreciate your choices. The freedom that comes from breaking cycles of competition and comparison is worth more than any promotion or acquisition. Marcus and I had both been trapped in roles that limited our ability to truly see and appreciate each other. Roles that had been unconsciously assigned and reinforced through years of family dynamics. What began as a painful moment of public mockery had transformed into one of the most valuable gifts I have ever received. An authentic relationship with my brother, based on mutual respect rather than rivalry, and a family that had evolved beyond narrow definitions of success to embrace the diverse paths we had chosen. As I reflect on this journey, I realize that sometimes the most painful moments can indeed lead to the most meaningful growth. It took a shocking revelation at a holiday dinner to break patterns that had been years in the making. But without that moment of truth, we might never have found our way to genuine connection. I wonder if any of you have experienced similar moments of painful truth in your own families. Have you found ways to transform competitive relationships into supportive ones? Or are you still struggling with family members who don't understand or value your chosen path? Share your experiences in the comments below, and remember to like and subscribe if this story resonated with you. Thank you for listening to my journey from family rivalry to true brotherhood, and may you find the courage to embrace authentic success in your own life, however it may look.